Welcome to part 3 in this series covering the Worldwide Fund for Nature New Species Report. In this part, we are starting our journey through the countries in the Mekong River region and are taking a closer look at the highlights of the newly discovered species. We will not look at all the 230-plus species here, but focus on a selected few. Links to the report and time codes are in the video description. Are you ready to travel and discover new species? Amazing discoveries awaits. Let's go. An extraordinary 234 new species of vascular plants and vertebrate animals were discovered in the Greater Mekong region in 2023. The Greater Mekong region of Southeast Asia, comprising Cambodia, Laos, Myanmar, Thailand, and Vietnam, is part of the larger Indo-Burma Biodiversity Hotspot. It is home to globally iconic and endangered species, including the tiger, the Asian elephant, and the giant freshwater stingray. New species are discovered here every year, as researchers continue to explore remote natural habitats and sift through specimens preserved decades back in natural history museums and botanical gardens across the world. The 2023 discoveries bring the total species of vascular plants, fishes, amphibians, reptiles, birds, and mammals described by science in the region since 1997 to 3,624. In the last year, researchers have brought some remarkable new species to the world's attention, including a soft-furred hedgehog, a snake named after the Hmong ethnic group, a new freshwater fish that was already well known in the aquarium trade, and a new genus of palm tree. These new species, identified and described by keen naturalists and taxonomists and compiled here by WWF Greater Mekong, demonstrate that the region is still a fertile ground for scientific exploration and a hotspot of species diversity. But they also remind us of what we stand to lose if unsustainable development activities continue to disregard the value of nature, habitats, and the ecosystem services upon which people depend. Many species are likely to go extinct before they are even discovered, driven by habitat destruction, diseases spread by human activities, competition with invasive species, and the devastating wildlife trade. These species may be the key to discovering a new life-saving pharmaceutical, or a more bacteria-resistant species of edible plant, or a genetic variant of a genus that can help an entire taxa become more resilient to climate change. The discovery of new species every year highlights the importance of the remaining natural ecosystems and the interest of biological explorers in the Greater Mekong. It also drives home the tremendous need for increasing protection of the natural world. Without substantial conservation action, we will continue to lose the rich biodiversity that makes this region special. With active conservation efforts by governments, scientists, NGOs, and local communities, we can enable incredible new species, like the ones highlighted here, to continue to persist and be discovered for many years to come. First, we travel to the country of Cambodia. Cambodia, 2 new plant species have been discovered. Lindsaea kohkongensis, also found in Malaysia. Unlike most ferns, this one grows underwater. Lindsaea kohkongensis grows in mixed broad-leaved forests, in dark, moist areas along the edges of valleys and in crevices of rocks that are frequently submerged by water. Lindsaeaceae is a family of ferns found across the tropics comprising around 250 known species. This new species was found in 2010 as part of a study of the fern flora of Cambodia. It was collected near the village of Chamnar in Thma Bang district in the province of Kokong, which gives the species its name. I paid a visit to the Muséum National d'Histoire Naturelle in 2012 to confirm my intuition that what I had collected might be a new species, said In Chun Huang of the Department of Biology, Jeonbuk National University. We checked so many specimens of similar taxa, and I had originally suspected that my specimen was L. ensifolia or L. heterophylla. Researchers trawled through hundreds of herbarium specimens of 3 related species in the Lindsaea genus. They used microscopes and even a field emission scanning electron microscope that requires parts of the fern to be put in a vacuum and bombarded with electrons to investigate differences in the minute patterns and veins of its feather-like pinnate fronds and the fern's spores. During these investigations, it became clear that L. kohkongensis was identical to a specimen collected in Malaysia in 1915. That specimen had been labeled as a related Lindsaea species, but now, over a century later, has been recognized as a new discovery. In other words, I was able to use my new specimen to recategorize the specimen collected in Malaysia, while also determining that the specimen I had collected was indeed a novel species, says Huang. I imagine the researchers who discovered it first must also have had a lot of concerns about determining the taxonomy, but they did not recognize it as a new species. It feels like they granted me this great opportunity to describe a new species. Here is the Cinnamomum kostermannii. It has also been found in Vietnam. This new species of cinnamon tree is one of 15 new species in the Laodracon family described from the region. It was identified as part of a systematic effort to examine and classify existing specimens from various herbariums around the world to prepare a revised account of the flora of Laos, Cambodia, and Vietnam. Cinnamon is famously used around the world and in Southeast Asia for cooking, but it can also be used as medicine. It has traditionally been used to treat a wide array of ailments by improving colon health, improving blood circulation in the uterus, and acting as an antimicrobial, antifungal, and anti-diabetic. Cinnamon from Vietnam accounted for 20% of the global commercial production in 2021 by volume, being one of 4 countries, along with China, Indonesia, and Sri Lanka, that make up 98% of the world's cinnamon production. Species of Cinnamomum are difficult to identify, and the many species from Indochina have a complex history, says lead researcher Rogier de Kock. It was interesting to unravel this, working on the historical herbarium specimens in the Paris Herbarium. Many species are used by local people, and increasingly species are being investigated for pharmaceutical use. Despite their cultural and economic importance, the region's cinnamon species have received limited attention from researchers. Dutch-Indonesian botanist Doc Kostermans wrote an account of the Cinnamomum species of the region in the 1980s, but it was never published, although many of the names he proposed were used on identification labels in herbariums. This species is named in his honor. The Cinnamomum kostermannii tree grows to a height of 10 to 12 meters, with a diameter of about 20 centimeters. It differs from its close relative C. hainianum in several ways, including in the yellowish color of the hairs on its twigs, the size and shape of its buds, and its smooth lower leaf surfaces. The species is known from only 2 localities, one in Cambodia and one in Vietnam. Because of this, it's been assessed as endangered on the IUCN Red List of Threatened Species. Now we travel to the country of Laos, where 19 new species has been discovered. Of these, 3 are already counted as endemic. The Muangfuanf leaf-toed gecko, found at the foot of a rocky mountain among lowland karst forests near Muangfuanf, Laos, illustrates just how much diversity there still is to discover within the region's reptiles. The Dicksonius genus, commonly known as leaf-toed geckos, was first established in 1997 to contain 2 species that are found throughout the Greater Mekong. But since then, researchers have discovered another dozen species within the genus which have evolved separately from each other over the last few million years, including D. Muangfuangensis and another new species described at the same time in Vietnam, D. gialaensis. The discovery of these new species further emphasizes the underappreciated herpetological diversity of the genus Dicksonius and illustrates the continued need for fieldwork in these regions, says researcher Huyen Thuong Nguyen. Using a comprehensive system of measurements and observations, backed up by statistical tests and molecular analysis, researchers have been filling out the Dicksonius family tree to see how and where the different species of leaf-toed gecko diverged from each other. D. muangfuangensis is most closely related to D. lao, an endemic species discovered in Laos in 2020, but can be distinguished by differences in its head shape and color patterns. The 2 species were found 500 kilometers apart, separated by the Nam Ngiap and Zabangphai river systems. The species diverged from each other around 3.5 million years ago, during interglacial periods in the Pliocene era, a time where the Earth's climate became cooler and drier, although still hotter than the global average today. It's likely that climatic changes and the formation of new karstic habitats and granite hills prevented movement and interbreeding between populations, setting them on separate evolutionary trajectories as they became separated and adapted to different environmental pressures. The Muangfuanf leaf-toed gecko was found near the Zhangixalus temple, which is associated with the origins of Buddhism and attracts many worshippers and tourists. With visitor numbers increasing, it's vital to protect the species' habitat. Here is the Laodracon, endemic to Laos. Can you see it? It has a very cool camouflage pattern. With a name that could feature in a Lord of the Rings movie, the Laos karst dragons sound like they should be hard to miss. But these members of the Agamidae, dragon lizard family, have been hidden on the jagged karst pinnacles of Laos for millions of years. Now, with tourism infrastructure on the karsts increasing access to new areas, researchers have concluded that this medium-sized lizard, spotted by a guide on a zipline tour, represents not just a new species, but a new genus. The lizard's swollen tail base and enlarged scales distinguish it from all other genera in the Draconinae subfamily, and DNA tests confirmed that it belongs to a different lineage. It's also only been seen on limestone pinnacles, 50 to 70 meters high, suggesting it's uniquely adapted to these habitats, a specialization that hasn't, to date, been reported among any other Draconinae. Local people say these lizards are rare and have never been recorded at ground level. Karst pinnacles, jagged limestone outcrops that have been eroded over the aeons, are unique islands of biodiversity. Their fractured surfaces form numerous microhabitats that foster extraordinarily high levels of endemic species, many of which have a very narrow range. They also provide a refuge for species that may have been lost from the wider area due to climatic changes and competition with other species. Researchers believe that the karst landscapes of Laos, Cambodia, and Vietnam are likely to hold many undiscovered species. Our study provides further evidence that Indochinese karstic landscapes, forming numerous hardly accessible habitats such as isolated valleys, caves, underground rivers, and pinnacles, still cradle unique and yet-to-be-discovered biodiversity, the authors state. At the same time, due to human activities such as cement production, limestone massifs represent one of the most endangered habitats in Southeast Asia. Unfortunately, the immense financial returns of mineral extraction from karsts largely outweighs concerns for biodiversity conservation, leaving approximately 99% of karstic landscapes with no legal protection. A large limestone quarry just 8 kilometers from where the new species and genus was collected represents a potential threat. Researchers say there is an urgent need for appropriate management and conservation of karst massifs so that biodiversity like this new species and genus can be protected. Say hello to the Glyptothorax catfish. This species has also been found in China. Sometimes researchers can be aware of a species for a long time before they have the time and resources to properly describe and classify it. That was the case with this species of catfish, which lives in rapids, waterfalls, and other habitats with strong currents in the middle section of the Mekong River basin in China and Laos. Maurice Cottelat, who has described hundreds of new fish species, first came across it in 1996. I found it at low density in about every set of large rapids where I sampled in northern Laos over the last 30 years, he says. It was first tentatively identified as similar, but not identical, to a species from further upstream in the Mekong Basin in China. Eventually, Cottelat and his colleague Hyok Hee Nung were able to carry out a detailed comparison of specimens from Laos and China with other Glyptothorax species found in the Mekong and adjacent rivers. They concluded that this dark-colored, rheophilic, rapids-loving catfish was a new species. Growing up to around 70 millimeters long, it's characterized by the irregular, large and small tubercles or nodules on the sides of its body. Here is the beautiful Zhangixalus, which is a medium-sized tree frog discovered in evergreen forest at a height of over 2,000 meters on Phao Samsum Mountain in northeast Laos. The males measure around 35 millimeters, with a bright grass-green back and a cream-colored belly. The females are larger, about 54 millimeters, and are a darker bottle green color. It has characteristic black and white spots on its flank. The species epithet melanoleucus comes from the ancient Greek words for black and white. Researchers carried out morphological and molecular tests and analyzed its call using sonograms to determine it was a unique species. Its advertisement call consists of clicking sounds with a series of notes, each 0.28 seconds in duration and consisting of 2 to 3 pulses. This call can be distinguished from its relatives by its higher dominant frequency and lower number of pulses per note. The species is only known from the location where it was collected, but it may be present in other mountain areas in neighboring provinces. All specimens were recorded in trees and vegetation in undisturbed primary forest, suggesting it is a strict forest-dwelling specialist. Zhangixalus was recognized as a separate genus in 2019, including 40 known species, one-third described in the last 2 decades. There are likely many more undescribed species in the region. The mountains of northern Laos are a crucial center for amphibian diversity, with high rates of endemism, but are among the least studied areas in Asia. This highlights the need for further funding into exploratory biodiversity research. We hope that you found this information interesting. Follow us in the next part, where we continue our journey through the countries in the Mekong River regions and delve deeper into the WWF New Species report. Please consider to like and subscribe, or perhaps share this video to someone that may find this information interesting. Thank you for watching. We wish you an amazing day.